Okay. So if you see, I have completed this one and I've showed you like each step by step whatever you need to do. Okay, so when you are creating the virtual machine, the important point is, I just wanted to show you is, see, there is a space where you have to assign key memories. Okay, so that memory assignment, at least, I mean, I suggest you to do it for 8 GB. I mean, some of them also go for 4 GB, but the VM speed and everything becomes quite slow. Okay, and always we have to have a dynamic memory allocation, because if the resource consumption is more, then it can take more resources from your local machine, because we are feeding it from your local machine. So that is why this memory of RAM is important, and we need to allocate the proper way of, like, properly we have to allocate. And second thing is internet. By default, when you are creating this, we have to give them a networking, right? And by default, we give them a default switch. So default switch means your laptop should have a proper Wi-Fi connection, internet connection, so that that internet will be used in your VM to run the process. Okay, and your VHD should be created. Okay, so these steps are important. Apart from that, other steps are there, but these two are important things that I wanted to show you, because whenever we start creating, if you do not have this space, there'll be no point of doing this exercise. Okay, so if you are having a good memory, it is definitely recommended to go for this as a space, and then you should have a proper internet connection in your laptop also. So I mean, do not use your like mobile data or something. I mean, if you have Wi-Fi connection, it's better. Others, if you're using mobile connection, it's fine. But make sure you are at some place where the connection and the network in your mobile is good. Okay. Okay. So then we'll start with the session for today. Okay, so I think we have discussed this part. I believe everyone is, I think we are good with this, right? If any questions, please ask me, raise your hand. So three type of classes we discussed: runnable classes, jobs, and we have our regular classes, and we have our periodic batch classes. I think the purpose of these three classes are fine. We are good. We know how to do it. So jobs are basically whenever we try to run something for our own testing and data point of view, we do create a job, and then we do create regular classes to run our processes, and we can attach that to our forms and tables. And we have a batch classes, which is my periodic classes, which runs on a periodic basis, and those create some data, delete data, or do some process in the system. And yeah, so it's X++ coding language is similar to any object-oriented programming, or what we call as OOPS. And so compiler is .NET compiler. The benefits we have discussed over our previous version, and we are using our .NET assembly. So the main advantage is the .NET assembly web services is very easily accessible for all of us. Okay. Okay. So then we have to just, for whenever we're writing the code and everything, just we need to process filtering. Yeah, intelligence. I think we have discussed. This is a very important part. Right? And you will, when you will run, you will start writing the code. You will learn more on this. So I just write on this one. Okay, so it's like automatically system will suggest all the objects to you whenever you are writing the code in the space you are working on. So in your class, so take an example. If you have a big class where you have 10 or 15 different methods, or 100 different methods, and in that class you are trying to bring an object from one of the database, from one of the table, and you have already declared some variable. So by default, if you start writing in that whole class, whenever you start writing something, it will suggest you that variable, so that you don't need to remember the exact keywords or exact how you have given the variable. Then it just gives you all the options whichever you have present in this class. Okay, so that's the very right way of doing it, the intelligence part. Okay, and so again, it varies with version of the Visual Studio, which is true, because I mean this version 9, the version 19, whichever I was using actually yesterday, that has like quite a few new items I saw yesterday. So those were like the new additions. Which if you are creating a VM and Microsoft has given a Visual Studio 2017 in that. So maybe it will vary somehow, but 80% of the things will be similar because these intelligence were also there in the previous versions also, and in Visual Studio it is more refined, and this predictive tool, this typing tool is more refined, and you can use it for our own benefit. Okay, so that is a good way of doing it, and please remember this is one of the, I would say, one of the key advantage of writing the code in our X++. So we don't have to remember all our syntaxes, anything. Okay, because whenever you write a select statement or something, you are missing something, automatically it gives you an error signal in your line, so that you don't need to go and compile the compile your class or compile your table objects to understand, oh, okay, there was an error and there's a mistake. Once you start writing, it will give you an error instantly if there is a syntax error or if you have missed some keywords. Okay, so that is one important thing. Okay, okay, data types, I think we are good with the data types as of now. I believe just a brush up on this, I think these are why we have given this data type and composite data types, because these will be used as a variable in our all our logics and everything, right? So maybe you need to declare some values, maybe you need to put some values in the system and need to assign some those values. So those things are actually comes handy if you know what data type I am using. So this is just a brush up of what integer, real, string, date, time, fields, all these things are, because there can be cases where you need to write a code where you just go ahead and when you write the code, it gives you some error, or if you do not declare those variable correctly. Correct, because I mean right now we'll be seeing only small piece of code where I am writing maybe 50 100 lines, but actual cases we need to write maybe 1000 2000 lines of code for a big process. So in those cases, we need to declare so many variables. If you know the data types, that will help you to declare these variables very clearly. And the variable declaration is very key actually, because once you once I show you, you will understand. Because whenever you declare the variable, correct data type and everything should be assigned, and then otherwise there is a mismatch, and your code will give you wrong values. Okay, and these are my composite data types, and this is actually used when you have like complex set of code. Okay, arrays and container, I believe you know, like it's a list of items, and containers is a dynamic list. So containers, all these things we will discuss more when you learn the coding, but from the beginner's point of view, if you do not know anything, so if you know this part, primitive data type, that is good for us, and that is more than sufficient to get going. Okay, we do not need to know all the composite data types if you are not familiar with this, or if you do not have any prior background on that, it's fine. Arrays, containers we can learn later also, but you should be well aware of the primitive data types, because these variables are very unique. Because once you start assigning the values, then you will only understand then how these data types are working. Okay. Okay. Any questions on this before we go ahead with the other topics? Any questions on this part? Okay. So let us continue on that. Okay. EDT. If you remember, I this was actually discussed in the EDT classes also. So we are actually using EDTs to have a meaningful way of writing our code, because if you remember, I can give an EDT name according to my choice. Correct? If you see, we have created a bank table, transaction table, and we created one EDT enums according to bank account number, our enums like customer type, all these things, right? Those names and everything is as per my choice, so that whenever I'm writing my code, I can easily understand and easily remember those EDT and enums. Okay, and as I said, property of EDT, if you are inheriting some values and everything, so that actually is being can be used across the system. Okay, which actually consistency is getting is increased, and we are reducing our work, because the same EDT can be used in the code also. as a placeholder value or as a variable declaration. Okay, so please just remember that. So this EDT enum, whenever we are using creating inheritances or hierarchies of EDT, that properties are also being used in my own model whenever I am creating my classes or all my logics. Okay, so this is one thing, please remember that. So this benefit of EDT and enum. Okay, variable declaration. Okay, so all of you are, I mean, I know you know what are variables is. If you understand this part, are you good with this part?
Yeah, Mithri.
Okay, okay. Let us we'll spend some time. Just let me connect to the VM once. Just one second. Just give me a moment. I think I'm connecting to the VM. Okay. If you can see my screen, let us just create. So what are my variables? Okay, so variables is nothing but whenever I write my code. Okay, so this is a place. So it is simple place where I'm just going and writing my table coding. So whenever I write something, so I need to use some of the data type or data structure because I need to create some operation. So let us assume I have a like a item table, so where I have all the list of items and I need to perform some operation on that table. Maybe I need to create a data into that table or maybe fetch some record from that table. Who's the example which you're using? So yesterday, what's the customer table? And similarly from item table or something. So if you want to do an operation on that table, we cannot just have this access of the complete table and we cannot just write anything and we just cannot do that operation, right? So to make the database bring those things for our own purpose and whatever we are writing, we need to create an instance of that table. Okay, so that instance is getting created through a variable or a local variable or a global variable, what we call. So there is a concept of global and local. So global is nothing but if there is a this is a class, let's say I have this class and I have tens or thousands different methods. So consider this, so this is a class, right? And I this here I can see all my methods. Okay, here if right now we have only one method, but if you consider that there is like 10,000 of different methods and I need to declare some instances of some table, is a global parameter which can be used across all my methods or all my the places where I am writing my code. Similarly, local variables are nothing but a place where I can just simply go and I only want to use that instance into that method only. Okay, so that is the global and the concept of the local. So global is if I declare something that can be used across my class, across all the methods, and if I only using something in my global on a local method, that can be used only into that method. And why that is important, and why we only use actually mostly the recommended ways, we just declare as minimum global variable as possible. We just try to declare everything as a local variable, because once you have the global variable, then you have that option of everyone using the same variable, and there can be multiple operations happening on the same instance of that class, and that can be a nightmare for the coding, right? Because if there are big classes, so consider that in a global variable for one of the table, you have declared a customer table, and that instance in being used into 5 or 6 different local methods where 5 developers are working. Okay, and right now there's a 6th developer comes in. He also uses the same variable, and he writes some operation which actually is wrong, or which actually will like whatever those 5 persons were working on will delete everything, right? So those kind of chances are there. So the idea, right way of doing it, declare as many as as many as local variables as possible, and you try to minimize the number of global variables. Okay, that is one thing. So the variable is nothing but, as I said, we just create an instance and where kind of a placeholder where we actually get the values of the actual class. So if you just try to write an event table, right? This is my event table, and so this is the actual table, and I need to create an instance. So I just give it a name like maybe event table. Okay, so now whatever code you will write, if you will write based on this instance, and whenever any database operations you are doing through select statement, insert, delete, or update, all those operations will be performed on this table, because in this here you have declared so INV table will be actually representing event table, and your operation should be based on this. Why actually this is good for us, because we do not need to write, because this is used for this can be, these names can be given, any kind of name can be given. This is actually very helpful for the developers, because we just need to go and write the name of the big table every time when we write the operation. So the consistency, naming consistency, everything is maintained. So there is a best practice, what I just tell you, most of the cases I have seen the developers don't they don't go with that best practice, but the Microsoft best practice is whenever you're defining any variable, just give the same name as the table, so that it is easier for everyone to understand, and just the first letter should be a small, and if you have any other word after that, it should be capital, so that so as an example, so it is an invent table, so it should the variable should be invent table, but it should be starting with small I, and it should have a capital T. Okay, so that whenever I'm writing reading the code, so whoever is reading the code, he doesn't need to go back to that and just try to understand whatever there is, because from invent tables, so there are so many different tables. So let me give you an example. So there is a table called invent dimensions. Okay, and so if I just go and write you maybe ID. Okay, so it's a table of location. So if you see, if you are writing some your logic based on your inventory module, and if you have to do some operation in this module, and if you have to access all this table, that means you have need to declare all the variables. And if you just write like kind of this IAL ID or something like IT here, or just to save your time or something, then whenever you are writing the code, and if I am reading your code after a week or a month, I will not be able to. So if you just write select ID based on some logic or something, I'll not be able to understand. So if the variable name is meaningful, then it is easier for me to read the code, because let's say if then again you go and write some operation on, let's say invent table, so let's say select invent table here, See, it gives me this option of this variable and also the table name, right? So if you write this table in variable name, then it easier for me to understand, okay, there is a select statement I am writing based on my variable whichever is declared. Okay, so I hope this concept is clear on the variable. So it's a placeholder, or rather is an instance of the object which you have created, and the variable can be for anything, any object, anything. Right now, most of the cases we use variables for my tables. It can be for any EDT, enum also. Okay, any kind of data type also. So let's say if I have an enum for, let's say, sales type. We do not have enum for that. Okay. See, this is an enum sales type. See, by default showing enum sales type. Okay. I just need to declare a variable for that also. So that also I can do. I can go ahead and I can do a simple write of like sales type. Okay. So any object which I created, be it my EDT or enum or my tables, I can create the objects. Classes also, similarly, I can create classes as a variable also. And for classes, we have to initialize classes, and that's a different thing we'll learn later. But these things we have to identify. But if you just create a variable or an instance, and if you do not do not perform any operation, so it will always be a blank variable. So if you go and do a debug, and if you just right now, let's say I have written a select statement, select invent table, where I have an item ID something, and right now if you do a debug and if you try to see the values of ID, invent team, and IL, like the invent location, it will show you zero. The values will be shown as a zero because you do not haven't initialized or haven't done any operation on this variables, local variables. Okay, so this is my understanding of for the variable. So if you have any questions, please let me know. So let me show you something. Okay, so this is a small class, right? So if you see this is parts confirmation journal posting, so this is a small class. So if you open the designer or just simply try to view the code, so here if you see, so all the methods are showing like this. Okay, so if you go to any method, it shows you all the methods. So this is a construct method, and we have a new method run and all these things, correct? So this is the concept of, if you remember, I told you about my variables and everything, right? So let us try to see how it actually works here. Okay, this is maybe not the right one. Okay, now let us try to see this method. Okay. So this is a very like an important thing, like a very common class what we used to like write our code and everything. Okay, so what is this class? This is a purchase invoice journal posting. So whenever you are creating your purchase order, you have your there is a concept of posting. So posting means is nothing but you have a, whenever you do some financial posting or physical posting, you have to buy, it's like a end of your document. Okay, it's kind of an end of it. So invoice is an end of you in end of the process where you have a financial impact in the system, right? So that concept is called posting in dynamics. And so invoice journal means, so we are creating a purchase invoice. So if you see, this is a class, and this is, if you remember, I told you about global and local variable, right? So whenever I create my class, see, by default all these variables they have created here. And if I go and I will see, these variables can be used across all my methods. And here I have all these many methods. Okay, if you see, I have this many methods in the class. Okay, it's close to, I think, 100 different methods are there. And I here I have initialized all these different variables for all the different tables. They have these are data type, right? Primitive data type, boolean, right? They have it defined edts also. See, this amount card and everything are edts also. This is also an edt. All these things they have defined. And similarly, one edt or enum can have different variables. So for here you have defined one amount currency purchase value, and you can define all these things also apart from that. So similarly for tax 99, they have different so many different variables, right? So this is based on the thing. And right now you go to each and every method. So these are my method, right? So this is a protected method for only for using here. So here you can go ahead and use that method also. Okay, so let me show you. So if you go to print invoice for line table, so let's see. And see, this interface and everything is very user friendly, because if this is a big method and so you're seeing like this, but if you see, if you want to go to any line of your code, you can just simply hover through it and you can go through that. Okay, this is user, or otherwise you can just simply go ahead here and you can select your method from your previous versions of Visual Studio. It did not have this window. Okay, so right now this is more user friendly, and this was also not there in the previous versions of Visual Studio. So this is actually, they have built all these things in the new versions to make it more user friendly. Okay, so let us try to find this one. Okay, see, now here they have used this table into a different method. Okay, so calculate purchase last purchase price, here they have used this method. So if you go scroll this one, so they have used all the variables. Okay, so that was the concept of my local variable and the global variable. So what do I mean by my local variables? These are my local variables, where actually I have used a private method, and in that method I am using these variables. So these are actually my local variables. Okay, which those values can only be used in that method only. And if you go ahead and try to write your logic and try to find these variables in any other method, you will get null values. Okay, so this concept I hope is clear, because this is like one of the very basic important thing we need to learn on this one. Okay. Yeah, I think, yeah, so this is, I believe we are good on this. Any questions on that? Any questions?
Moment, I'm a
No.
Okay, if you are good with that, so I believe I mean, this is a very like a common class where we do all our changes and everything, because most of the customers, whenever we work, so this is a practical example I'm telling you. If you go, if someone is only implementing a vanilla, doing a vanilla implement, okay, vanilla implementation is nothing but whenever you go and we have very less customization, we or rather we only go and do a like a product implement. We just do not have any customization most of the cases. whatever Dynamics 365 system is, the customer will use that. They do not need any changes. It's just that we just need to test our system and we need to do our data migration. Whatever data customer is providing us, those data we are uploading, and customer will start doing transaction. We do not need to do any customization. Most of the cases, this is called a vanilla implementation, where whatever out of the box is available, we go and implement that. Okay, so in those implementations also, there are few documents on few things which customers need, which are invoice documents. Those invoice documents every customer needs once if they are doing their sales or purchases. So you should be like should be this 100% confirmed scenario is that if there's someone is doing very less customization, but still they will have some changes in their purchasing or sales document, maybe be it their invoices, be it their confirmation or the good receipt note, all these processes, they will need to do some changes in that to accommodate their maybe logo, or maybe their billing terms, maybe they have a different payment methods. All these things they need to accommodate into their invoice. Because if you see, if you go and buy anything from any vendor, if they give you an invoice, maybe format is similar, but the header, footer, everything is different for every company. So those things we need to change, and in some cases we need to do a change in some invoices or do some small changes. We need to bring some values. In those cases, these are the classes where you will go and change this. So I mean, once you are doing your development, so this is, I mean, the most of the cases you will face, that you do not need to go ahead and create a class from scratch. I mean, those are also cases like I'd say 50-50, but most of the cases, if you're going and doing and work in existing projects, these are the cases which you will receive where you have an existing process and you need to do a change in that existing process, and those existing process mostly relate to my sales or purchase document, invoice posting, maybe changing in my confirmation, all these things. And by default system has created all these methods, and you need to find the right place where you need to do your coding. So what will be my approach? If you want to do a change in your class, you have to create an extension of this class. You need to find out where which method I need to do a change, and you need to write a code using chain of command. That we'll learn later what is chain of command, but this is the concept. So we need to find the exact place, which method, what will be my variable, everything. Okay, and because these are all system classes, and so that is why it is a much more, I'd say, critical or much more uh, tougher to write, change these things, or rather than writing something from scratch, because here everything is already written. You have to know the exact place and know the exact uh, piece of code which you need to write. Okay. And all the classes, if you go and check out, I think you have a online PM access. If you go and just look into every class or everything, you will see there are a lot of validations for any kind of where you see something like post, you will see a lot of validations. Okay, so those things you can also go and see and explore. Okay, so if you see all these can methods, so can post tags, all these things, there are so many validations you will see. Okay. So those things you can just go and explore from your own. So this, similarly, this is one, and there will be another for my let's say journal. Okay, so these are the classes which are used for the general ledger, like accounting entry. So basic class. Okay. This is an extension class, but this is very important. Again, one of the basic classes when we work on is general accounting entry. So this class is actually used whenever you are creating any journals, general journals, and we So once we post something as a general journal, which is our daily journals, so we have our accounting entries, and those are also being managed through all these classes. And if you go to this class, you will see a lot of code is written on these classes. Okay, so if you want to do any customization changes, you need to have a good idea. These are the, like I would say, the basic or like the initial starting point. So go ahead and try to find those purchasing post classes or accounting entry classes. These are the things where you can go ahead and just try to see how the coding. You will not understand anything, I get that, but just try to get a hold of everything, like how these variables are being declared, how many variables they are using, if they are using those variables, how the local and global variables are working. Okay, so please try to have a look into these classes. Okay, so just focus on the variable part which we have discussed. Okay. Okay, so let us continue on the session now. So if you see the variable, so yeah, I mean these are the benefits I will say. So yes, so they always declare variables prior to using them in an executable statement. Similarly, if you have a variable for whichever examples I was showing, inventable inventing, please declare those variables. Declare variables in small scopes, which is nothing but the scope or the local variables is recommended. Do not go and create all the variables in the as a global scale. Always using the small scopes, okay? And always whenever your variables is declared, so use for these keywords and everything. So it should be very clear what initialization or inference you are getting from that variable. Okay, so that keywords are important. Okay. So this is for my variable. So any questions on variable? Because see, when if I start writing the code, this is the first point you need to understand. So if you do not understand variable, or if you can't like initialize a variable, you will not be able to proceed further. Okay. So please, if you have any questions, please this is the right time to ask, because this is the first point where we are working. Okay. Any questions?
So, Meta, is there any sequence that we need to follow as a best practice while declaring a variable? Like, for example, in my code or in my project, we have variables for tables. We have some variables for primitive data types also. So, do we need to follow some sequencing, like to first define all the variables which are belonging to my primitive data types, then to go for classes, then to go for tables, like this?
No. No, 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 no. There is nothing like that. So that I just need to define my EDT num first, then I go create my table variables. Nothing like that. It's just that you can, because if you see, if you remember this example which I showed you, right? Like here, if you go to here, they are creating everything. See, all these are tables. Now they are creating a primitive data. Then again, they are using a primitive. This is a class. Okay. So this is an enum. This is an EDT. Okay. All these things you can create on your own. There is no sequencing or nothing like that. But see, if you see the name of naming, see, this is a very unique basic class. If you see the name, which I told you, right? How you name this? See, this is a main invoice information table, and they have given the name exactly copy pasted, but the first letter is small, which I actually told you. Similarly, parts like similarly exactly like this. All this, whatever, how many big names you see, if you go and just write this thing, you will find that, like, it's not easy to write all the, there's a huge table name, and you just try to need to write everything. So maybe you can skip that and just give a name, something like cookie table or something, which is not easy to understand, because this variable you will be using across all your methods, and so many developers will be using the same variable. Because once I say that one class can be used like for a one way, like many developers, this is a class which I give you an example, because there are so many methods and no one person has created this class. Okay, so this is a fact. And the Microsoft, if you know how they work the structure, so they have so many vendors working for them, and those vendors have different web developers working at the same time. So this is a big process, and there might be 4 or 5 different developers have worked in these classes, and all not all of them have the common like mindset to write coding. So you need to define a best practice so that everyone can follow, and this is the best practice. Okay. And yeah, one more thing, if you have many variables to declare, let's say parts quantity, this is an EDT of quantity type, and then you need to mention why you are creating that variable. So this is a parts quantity, and you are using parts quantity three times, collect quantity. So you know like why I am declaring that variable, and you give a meaningful name to that invoice update on. Okay. So this parts quantity they have given sales update quantity delivered not invoiced. So this is the meaningful way of doing. So if I'm writing or reading the code, I will understand okay this variable whenever see if you see this variable it will be used somewhere, right? So if you go here, yeah, exactly. See here they have written some method, and they have I mean assigned some values, and they have pass that as a variable to some of the method. And right now, if you see, okay, palm quantity, this method, whenever you open this method, you will see, okay, there is a quantity field coming up, which is invoice update on, which is easier to understand. Right now, here, if I only give parts quantity, it is not easy to understand. So it should be a meaningful then. So if you go and see here, they have initialized, right? Invoice update only, and they have given this value. So they have assigned this value. So this is a value. So how we are understanding? Okay, we are writing the code and always put these commands also like these messages. So why you are writing? So here they have given reset last voucher date, and so they are giving this value always. So this is quantity actual update is collected. So they are actually these five updates. Why is happening? Because quantity update is happening, and here they are writing. Okay, invoice update only. There is a variable, and what is the value? So post inventory state, and from that I am giving this value. So this is how you write the code actually, just to make it more easier to understand. Because small classes is fine, but you have to spend most of the time analyzing the existing classes and knowing this how they have written and see most of the cases. If you go and start work, they can give you any project where there are some incidents coming up, errors are also occurring, right? Can be support projects also. So I mean we all want to work in development project, and we do not want to work support project because we see that there's no scope of learning or something. But I differ in some way, because once you start knowing the product, you will know that if you're working in a good support project where there are good issues coming up, or there are change requests coming up where you need to go and do some changes, your learning curve is more steeper, I'd say, because you can go and read the existing code, and you have to uh, understand what is written there, and you need to change that. So that's a more difficult job, I'd say. Or rather, just to go and write a class where you go and write everything on your own from scratch. So that's a different thing. So here, if you go and
Pranjana,
see,
can you just go at the very top of this class? Very first few lines of this class.
so you want to go to like the global
Like
variable
on the same XPP only. Yeah, very first line where we have declared the variables, right?
this is the base.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, remember this naming convention. This is important. This is for you to also read the code easily. Okay, and whenever, yeah, one more important thing for variable declaration. If you are using an EDT in let's say primitive data type, let's say Boolean or something like that, right? These are EDT, right? And these are primitive data type, which is Boolean, correct? And similarly we have this map is also something like that, and also Boolean, this container, if you see this container also, these are also primitive, like, these are not EDT. So EDT is this one, this is an EDT translate. But you by reading the name you understand, okay, transaction date. Or here we
Yeah.
have a
What is this?
amount
Yeah, Amita, sorry. What is
yeah,
this? Something which started with
yeah,
the hash ISO country region code. But what hash is denoting here?
yeah, just let me finish, I'll explain. Yeah, okay, so
Okay.
just remember this primitive time, do not all. It is not at all recommended, or you do not give the same name as the data type. That means the boolean, you will never give the name as boolean here. Okay, the variable type. You always give a meaningful name. Similarly, we have your own cases or your own methods also, right? Let's say if you go and write something here. Let's say if you go and write, let's say string. Okay, string 1260 or say str. So what is str? Str is nothing but string, right? So if you want to declare a variable of, let's say I declare the variable of string. So this is a very wrong way of writing your piece of code. Okay, it will work. So first of all, it will again take as a variable. So this will not be allowed. But again, let's say if you let's say if I just give a variable name of string 60 or something, wait, do not give any name like that, which is not at all meaningful. Okay, so this is not at all recommended. So let's similarly for real field or something. First of all, those are we do not use that much. It is not recommended. So let's say this is real, and I go ahead and write real value. Okay, and it will work. All the system will work, but this is the wrong way of writing because this is not a meaningful name. What is real value? No one is going to understand. If you see all these names, all this has completely name. If you read the name, you will understand. Okay, so this is a right way of writing your code. Whenever you are doing the variable, and please make it a habit of writing the this declaring this variable from now onwards. Okay, because if you have the practice, then only you will be able to write a good code in the later point of time. Because if you start writing uh, giving like garbage values to the name or variables, this will not be useful in a later point of time. Okay, so if you want to have a career, so remember just writing code is not the only thing. Analyzing code and just trying to find out the error, I mean, to design everything is a much harder job. Okay, so in that way you have to know all these things. And once you write a big piece of code, you will know that how important is to give a big good meaningful name. Yeah, and to come to your question, so if you see, yes, this is a ISO country region code means this is a macro they have defined for ISO country region code, and this they will be using somewhere else. Okay, so this is a macro. That concept I'll explain you later. Okay, so this is a predefined macro, and they have used some country code because this is a invoice journal posting, and there are so many processes going on for invoices, and different classes, countries rather, have different processes. So they have defined this macro, and they have must have used this macro or country code somewhere else. Okay, so let us try to find out some. Yeah, see, they have given this ISO country region code, so that macro will be enabled. So what is that macro? That macro is this one for Italian. See, this is Italian functionality of bad books and bad book syrups. Okay, so this ISO ID is a macro for Italian company, and this will only be used for Italy legal entity. Okay, so this piece of code is only for Italy. Okay, so by this they have initialized this macro, and they have used this macro, which is an ISO ID. Okay, I think this has been used later also, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, here they have initialized again, and they must have, yes, this is for India. See, ISO IN. Okay, for Indian localization. Here also they have given GST reference IN. So this is a enum field. This is also there in this. So this is like not recommend to just go ahead and look into this now. These are complex in how to declare a macro and everything, but just to know, this is for our macro purposes. Okay. Any questions on this? So I suggest everyone. So please today and tomorrow, if you have time, please concentrate on two things. First, download the VHD. Okay, that's important. If you can, if you have a system, please do that. and I'll share the document with tomorrow or day after tomorrow so that you can create a virtual machine. Please do that. Otherwise, if you do not have any option, if you cannot arrange any system or you have professional interface or your download is not happening, then please do not waste time on that. Go ahead and start work on the this VM, which is an online game, and start looking into the classes and small jobs. Okay, just learn to see how the variables are declared, because that is the very basic thing you need to understand. Otherwise, you will not be able to write any code. Okay, because any piece of code starts with variable and how these local and global variables are being declared. Okay, so please try to learn all this and just see each and one of the code. There are also small classes, so if you go to, and if you are not I mean not at all comfortable with this with such a big classes, you go ahead and see any classes, right? It's taking time. Okay, so here if you try to find out anything related to bank, so anything related to cash and bank or bank, so those are more or less small classes. Okay, just try to find those things. Bank account balance or all these things are small classes. If you go and try to find anything for inventory, those will be big classes. So related anything related to your inventory and anything, so those will be big classes. And these are this contract controller. If you see, these are all the report classes. These are related to my report. So try to have a look into these classes and see how this is the variables are being declared. Okay, and how if and if you see all these classes, you will see most of the cases, it's 95% of the cases, the naming conventions are maintained. Okay? But and these namings are very important for us. So please remember that. Try to make a good habit of giving good names. Otherwise, it is not advisable. If you are running a good, so again, if you see this runnable class, this is a job class, right? And these job classes we generally use for our own testing purpose. In this class, if you go and just give some small names, you know that I just need to go and test some values, then it's fine. You can, after you're writing your code, if you everything is confirmed, you go and delete that class. Mostly these jobs are not recommended. They go and we go and delete this because these are not needed. This is not used anywhere. This is for our own unit testing. Correct. So you can go ahead and delete that. But remember, if any process you are building, any batch classes, any big process classes, please maintain this naming convention of this variable declaration. Okay. Okay, so please, I'll wrap up the session today. Please go ahead and complete the work for PhD, and please let me know if you have any issue over WhatsApp or through email. But I believe you know the requirement now. If those requirements are being met, please, you know, create the PhD. We'll then create a virtual machine from there. Okay.